Why wasn't some irrational number? We'll never know. I suspect the devs planned it, but that's a bit of a conspiracy theory. I just love the smell of cracking petroleum in the morning. Oh, yeah. Time to school these kids on how to get it done. Roll the film. All right. So here we are. We have basic oil refining in place. And at a certain point, once you've researched it, you want to move on to advanced oil refining and cracking. So the idea here is you want to be able to crack all your heavy and light oil down into petroleum. Because what we've been doing so far is I have all this set up, and I'm changing any extra heavy and light oil into solid fuel. Because what will happen is these get backed up. If your heavy gets backed up and your light gets backed up, then you can't produce any more petroleum. And you're basically dead in the water. And for the most part, we're just using the petroleum. We use it for sulfur, to make sulfuric acid, to make batteries. We're using it for plastic. So essentially, all we need is petroleum. Yeah, we could use a little bit of light and heavy to make the flamethrower fuel, but outside of that, we don't have a lot of use for it. So what we're going to do, we're going to work on our ratios to get from refineries to petroleum, and we're going to use cracking to get there. So what we're going to do, we're going to head on over. I got a little mock-up that I set up, and we're going to go over how to ratio getting from refineries to how many cracking to get everything to petroleum. Let's go take a look. All right, so here I have a little setup to kind of illustrate what we're going to do, and as we work through the different ratios to get to a quote-unquote perfect cracking setup. Here we have our refining. Here is our chem plant, which is going to be cracking the heavy into light. And then here's the chem plant that is cracking the light into petroleum. And down here over at this tank is going to represent all our petroleum. So that's where everything's getting funneled to. And we can see up here, here's the petroleum going out this way. Light is heading south. Heavy is heading to the right. Now, to balance going from one thing to another, we always talk about ratios and figuring this out. We have to determine the rate at which things are getting passed from, for example, an assembly machine to another assembly machine, or from assembly machine to chem plant, or refinery to chem plant. And so there's always going to be two rates. We're going to have the rate at which the refinery, in this case, produces, and then we're going to have a rate at which the chem plant consumes that item. So in this example, what we're going to do, we're going to call the output of the heavy from the refinery R1 for rate 1, and then we're going to call the rate at which the heavy to light chem plant consumes rate 2. And then we're going to call the rate at which the refinery outputs light rate 3. Rate 4 is going to be the rate at which the chem plant that cracks from light to petroleum, the rate that it consumes, R4. These are going to be the same, right? Because it's the same chem plant. It can only consume at a single rate. And then we're going to call this rate, rate 5, the rate at which light oil is outputted by the chem plant that cracks from heavy to light. And so essentially what we have to do is we have to match up these different rates. So we got to get R1 to equal R2. We got to get R3 to equal R4. And we got to get R5 to equal R4. So these rates are given to us. So what we're left to do is the only thing we can do is come up with the number of refineries or chemical plants to keep it balanced. And so what I'm going to do, we're going to name that number of refineries X. We're going to call the number of heavy to light chem plants H. And then we're going to call the number of light to petroleum chem plants L. So the first equation we got to figure out is balancing the number of refineries to chem plants that are cracking heavy to light. So we've done this before. We're going to set X times rate 1, and we're going to set that equal to H rate 2. So what we're doing is we're multiplying the number of refineries times the rate of output and setting that equal to the number of chem plants times the rate of consumption, the rate of input. The other equation we got to figure out is essentially we got two inputs coming into our light to petroleum cracking. And so that equation, in order to balance out the light coming from the refineries plus the light coming from the heavy to light chem plant, essentially that's X times this rate, add that to H times R5, and set that equal to L times the rate at which it consumes. So there we have our two equations that we have to figure out. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look and find out what some of these ratios are. If we click on these, we can see that the oil refinery, it will output 10 heavy oil every 5 seconds, 45 light oil every 5 seconds, and 55 petroleum every 5 seconds. So we're just going to put that in our little mental notebook and keep that stored safe and sound there for future reference. Coming down to the chem plant that is cracking the heavy into light, we take a look and it produces 30 light oil every 3 seconds. And down below, we can see that it consumes 40 heavy oil every 3 seconds. Again, mental notebook, future reference. And then finally, for the light to petroleum cracking, we can see it will produce 20 petroleum every 3 seconds. We're not too concerned about that. But it consumes 30 light oil every 3 seconds. So let's take a look and plug in our ratios. R1 is, and this is for the heavy oil output from the refinery, is 10 heavy every 5 seconds. Down here, the rate at which heavy is consumed by this chem plant is 40 heavy every 3 seconds. The rate at which the refinery outputs light, 45 light every 5 seconds. And then the rate at which the chem plant down here that cracks the light into petroleum consumes is 30 light every 3 seconds. So obviously R4, these are both going to be 30 light every 3 seconds. And as luck would have it, R5, the rate at which this chem plant cracks heavy to light is 30 light every 3 seconds. So we can see that R4 is equal to R5, which makes our life a little bit easier. It's a 1-to-1 ratio for heavy to light cracking to light to petroleum cracking. Those two connect. Now, one thing we do have to consider when looking at chem plants is their crafting speed. So chem plants have a crafting speed of 1.25, and we don't have to really worry about this for the refineries because they have a crafting speed of 1, and 1 times anything is that anything. So in order to adjust these rates, we're going to multiply both R1 and R5, and R5, remember, is equal to R4, and this is R4 right here. We're going to multiply both of these by 1.25, and that will give us 50 heavy every 3 seconds. And if we multiply this by 1.25, that will give us 37.5, again, light every 3 seconds. So we got to adjust all our ratios to take into account the crafting speed. All right, so now that we've adjusted our ratios to account for the crafting speed of the chem plants, we can start plugging some of these rates into our equation. So we're going to take, we still have this X, we're going to take rate 1, 10 heavy every 5 seconds. We're going to set that to H. We have our rate 2, 50 heavy every 3 seconds. So now all we're going to do is we're going to create the ratio kind of like we've done in past videos. First thing we're going to do, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, 3 seconds over 50H. We got to keep things balanced on both sides of the equation. Multiply on this side, 3 seconds divided by 50H. These cancel out. Our seconds are going to cancel. The heavy cancels. The zeros cancel. And so if we multiply 3 times 1, obviously that's 3. 5 times 5 is 25. We have our X over here. Because these canceled out, we just have our H. Now we're going to divide both sides of the equation by X. And when we do that, we get 3 equals H divided by 25 over X. So you see, we have the exact same thing. We just divided by X on this side. This cancels out, divide by X, and you can see this is what we end up with. And so we can see that just the relationship between the refinery and the chem plant that is cracking heavy to light, we can see that we need 3 chem plants cracking the heavy, and we need 25 refineries. So far, so good. All right, so here we are. We got all the ratios placed back in. Here we have R4 and R5. We can see that they're all the same. We've adjusted them for crafting speed. And we have our equation up here where is going to be the final mission to get the proper ratios. So hopefully all this will work out in the end and we can get a nice number for L. We'll see. So what we're going to do, we're going to start plugging in our values. So we got X is equal to 25, R3, 45 light every 5 seconds. We're going to add that to H, which we figured out, 3 times R5, which is equal to R4, 37.5 light divided by 3 seconds. We're going to set that equal to L times R4, 37.5 light divided by 3 seconds. So, perfect. We have one unknown variable. We have one equation. We can absolutely figure this out. Another thing to notice that kind of puts you on the right track to figuring some of these things out, that all our ratios here are light oil over seconds. Light oil over seconds. Light oil over seconds. So when we start, this is a linear equation, so when we start adding and subtracting things, we need everything to be light over seconds. Otherwise, it ain't going to work. So the fact that they all say L over S means we're on the right track. And if you remember back to 5th grade or wherever they started, teaching you math, and the teacher said, be sure to label when you're doing these word problems. Be sure to label seconds and meters or miles or whatever. And you thought that was stupid, and they marked off points because you didn't label these numbers. Well, now you know why it's important. You might be playing Factorio someday in the future. Okay, so we can simplify some of these. 5 goes away is 1. This goes to 5. Lovely, lovely. The 3's cancel out. We got to keep the 1 here because we want to keep our seconds here. Otherwise, we'll get messed up later down the road. And so what we're going to do, 5 times 45 is 225 over 1 second. Add that to 37.5 over 1 second. Set that equal to L, 37.5 light over 3 seconds. So we can, oops, see, I forgot to put my L here, and it threw me off, because to be able to add, we need L's here in seconds. So adding 225L plus 37.5 equals 262.5 L over 1 second. These are common denominators, so and these denominators don't add up, they just stay as 1. We set that equal to L, 37.5 L over 3 seconds. Erase a few things here. And then what we're going to do, we're going to multiply both sides. 3S, 37.5 L. I'm running out of room. What you do on one side of the equation, you got to do on the other. These cancel out. Over here, now we can get rid of our labels here. S's go away, L's go away, because it wouldn't make sense to have L equal light oil or light oil over seconds. It's just going to be hopefully a whole number. We shall see. Breaking out our handy dandy calculator, we do 3 times 262.5, 787.5, divide that by 37.5. 21. Miracles of miracles. We got a whole number. It could have... Why wasn't it 20.33333333333 infinity? Why wasn't some irrational number? We'll never know. I suspect the devs planned it, but that's a bit of a conspiracy theory. So 21 equals L. And so there we have it. X equals 25, L equals 21, and then I erased it, but H equals 3. So that is our perfect ratio. 25 refineries, 21 chem plants cracking light to petroleum, and then 3 chem plants cracking heavy to light. You're welcome, world. All right, so the one problem we have with this is that 25 refineries is a whole lot of refineries. You need a whole lot of pump jacks to get enough crude to 25 refineries. You're probably talking mega base status if you get to 25 refineries. So, at the stage in the Frogger world, there's no way I'm laying down 25 refineries. That doesn't make a dang bit of sense. So we got to scale this down a little bit. Well, if we factor these things, we can see that obviously 21 is equal to 3 times 7, and 3 is obviously equal to 3 times 1, and that's it. And then coming up here, 25, and this is the fly in the ointment, is equal to 5 times 5. Well, what we can do is we can say 25, well, that's about equal to 3 times 8. 3 times 8 equals 24. It's probably close enough. And so, since now 3 is common to all of these, we're just going to get rid of the 3's. And now we're going to set a new ratio. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be close enough. We're definitely going to be able to crack everything we produce. There's going to be no backups because we're actually using a little bit less refineries, and we're using the correct amount of chem plants. So then we set X equal to 8, right? The 8 here. L to 7, that's here. H is equal to 1, right there. So that's the ratio we're going to use. 8, 7, 1. Back at our oil refining, we can see that I initially had it set up for 5, 7, 1. We had 10, so it would have been 10, 14, 2. So all I got to really do is kind of trim this back a little bit. And there we go. Everything should be connected back up. Then I'm going to go ahead and just tear down all this stuff. All right, so now that I got this all torn down, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to run some belts. I'm going to turn around all the inserters and just move all these heavy somewhere else, anywhere else. Hopefully somewhere that it won't get in the way. So something like that. And it'll eventually just all trickle in. So now it's time to set up our actual cracking. And as we just discovered, we're going to need 8 chem plants altogether. So we're going to go ahead, place down, I place down 4 on each side. I'll do these all as light to petroleum cracking, and then do this as heavy to light. We do got to bring in water. We also got to change these over. And I like leaving this much room in here so I can place beacons if I want. All right, so we got some electricity down, some light so we can actually see what we're doing. Let's go ahead and hook up some water. I'm going to bring these out 2 each. And we'll connect all these up. We'll connect the light up kind of on this side like that. We'll hook up our water on the front side. Something like that. Just got to find a way to tap into the water that's over here. Beautiful. Water is flowing. Now we'll connect our light up over here. We'll just kind of run this light that's coming out of this over to there. And get that over to that. And so now our light is flowing from here, flowing over. Gonna go into this side, this comes out and will flow around, and then all our petroleum is in here. Now we just got to get our heavy out, or in rather, and we can do something like that. So now our heavy can start being cracked down to light. We can see it's already working perfect. The only thing left to do is to figure out a way in which we want to connect in our petroleum, get it down into here. I think I'll just do something like that. And then we can just jump it across into that tank. And there you have it. Everything should be working, running, and should keep the refineries running full time as long as there's demand for petroleum. So we're not really doing anything besides doing a little bit of science. So there's not a whole lot of petroleum being used, so we're producing more than enough. The refineries really aren't working that hard because we just got enough. But eventually it'll keep things running, flowing smoothly. Lastly, to get the first step, or perhaps the final step, however you want to think about it, we're going to, let's see here. I think water goes on the heavy side. We got to disconnect these because you need to hook up water on one of the sides when you switch over. So we'll clear this to advanced oil processing, and indeed water goes over here. So we'll hook up all our crude like that, come out to copy and paste these over. So we'll just hook up the water, I don't know, some way. I'm not overly concerned. If we need more water, we'll just hook up more pumps. And there we go. Refineries are on, water's hooked up. We're producing more petroleum anyway by going to advanced refining. We're producing even more petroleum by cracking. And there we go. We got our refineries converted over to advanced. We figured out cracking. Job well done, I'd say. All the numbers, all the math. Oh, shit, that was a thing of beauty, I gotta tell you. But in the next episode, what's a factory without a little bit of lube? And I say, let's get rolling on some purple science. Dig it.